Okay, we're going to get started. We need to keep the program on schedule. So welcome back to those of you on the live stream viewing from around the world. We're really excited that you could be here with us today. We're glad to have those of you in the audience. I know we're going to be having more people come in. Hopefully it won't be too disruptive. But people are hungry, so it's lunchtime. So I want to introduce our panelists. We're so privileged to have these Hillel student leaders here today. And starting from my immediate right, we have Tali Dardashtian. Did I say that right? She's a senior at NYU studying childhood and special education and psychology. She's been involved in organizations and groups such as the Steinhardt Student Affairs, NYU Student Government, the Dean Student Leaders Advisory Council, and of course, NYU Hillel. As the co-president of Jewish on Campus at NYU, Tali is dedicated to uniting and strengthening the Jewish community by promoting the voices of Jewish students on campus. To Tali's right, Aidan Herzlinger, did that okay? Okay. He's a sophomore at Baruch College studying real estate development, and he's the vice president of the Leader Student Hillel at Baruch College. He's also serving as a Hasbara Fellow on campus, focusing on Israel advocacy and education. Aidan has been involved in the fight against anti-Semitism and misinformation through social media advocacy and meeting with lawmakers, including our own Congressman Richie Torres and Mayor Eric Adams. And to Aidan's right and to the right of our wonderful Limud banner, we have Aidan Yadegar. Okay, I did okay. She's a senior at Columbia University, also my alma mater, double majoring in Middle East Studies and Jewish Studies. And Aidan is one of the students who testified in Congress before the House Committee on Education and the Workforce about her experiences with anti-Semitism on campus, and also spoke at Congressional press conference preceding the hearings of the now former president of Columbia. She served as the president of Columbia Students Supporting Israel during and after October 7th, co-authored the viral In Our Name open letter from Jewish Columbia students, and she's a plaintiff in a Title VI lawsuit against Columbia due to the university's failure to protect Jewish students. You have such a full plate, I don't know when you find time to study. Anyhow, we're really excited, and that's true for all three of you, that you're here with us today. And Tali, Aidan, and Eden are going to be in conversation with Rabbi Joanna Samuels, who is the CEO here of the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan, who have been such amazing hosts and partners for Limud New York's learning event today. So thank you all, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Karen. I will add just a couple of things to my bio. The first is that I am a graduate of Barnard College, so I'm watching very, very closely what's happening at Columbia, and I am also the parent of a college sophomore. And so I have a lens into some of what each one of you, I think, will be talking about today. And given your incredible leadership in this space, I feel particularly honored to be in conversation with you because I understand from my own experience as a parent the kinds of headwinds that you have faced, both socially and academically, and I would imagine emotionally, as you are trying to make positive change in an environment that seems quite resistant to that change. And so I'm going to begin, and maybe I'll start with Eden, which is to share with us some highlights of what you have experienced in this 13-plus month period at Columbia and Barnard, and whether or not it surprises you in any way, given that you were a student before October 7th of last year. So we'll start with you and then move on, and I would love to actually just also have a conversation. And so maybe you'll speak for a couple of minutes, each one of you, and then kind of jump in and think about what's resonating about maybe what one of your fellow panelists has said.
Well, thank you so much for having us, to everyone at the JCC, and Hillel and Limud. We're very grateful. I think I can speak for all of us when I say we're all very grateful to be here and share our stories. I'm going to interpret highlights as lowlights and highlights, if that's okay. Because as I think everyone in this room knows, it's been a really trying year for college students in America. I'll speak to my experience because that's what I can do best. I hadn't really experienced any anti-Semitism at Columbia before October 7th. And I was sort of warned before going to Columbia by relatives saying, you know, they have a really bad anti-Semitism problem there. But that wasn't about to let me get in the way of moving to New York City and living my dreams. As someone from California, I really wanted to move to the East Coast and study Middle East studies and Jewish studies, and getting into Columbia was just sort of like a dream come true. And it still sort of feels that way, and that's why it's particularly painful that it's been such a difficult year. I'll answer this question with two anecdotes. Last spring, as I'm sure everyone saw, our campus was littered with tents and signs that said things like, if you don't stand in solidarity with our rockets, you are not one of us. We had the leader of Within Our Lifetime, which is a local New York City-based hate group. We had people like Cornel West preaching, you know, really just pure anti-Semitism, unfortunately. I can't categorize it as anything else. You had like literal shrines for terrorists. Last week on campus, they were honoring Sinwar on Veterans Day instead of honoring the veterans. And by the way, Columbia has the largest population of U.S. Army veterans out of, I think, any Ivy League university. And it's something the university really prides itself on. And so that was acutely painful to be praising a terrorist that not only was the mastermind behind October 7th, but is also responsible for American death as well as Israeli deaths. But at the same time, a few weeks ago for Simchat Torah, you had hundreds of Jewish and Israeli students dancing with the Torah in the middle of campus. And so as difficult as it is, and as much hate and vitriol as there is, and don't get me wrong, there unfortunately is still plenty of it, there's also so much hope and Jewish pride and resilience. And that's because of the leadership of groups like Hillel and Chabad on campus. I feel really blessed to go to Columbia for lots of reasons, and one of them is that our Hillel and Chabad are two of the strongest in the country. As an alum, I'm sure you're very familiar, but it was really, really sort of full circle to see hundreds of my classmates and I dancing right above sort of the scene of where this encampment happened just a few months ago. And that's sort of describes where we are now.
Thank you so much. Aidan, I'd love to hear from you and maybe just describe to everyone what campus life is like for you.
Yeah. First of all, Aidan said that, you know, before October 7th, she hadn't experienced any anti-Semitism on campus. I hadn't even experienced college. This was like my first experience fighting anti-Semitism. I was a freshman last year, so for me, this is all I know on campus, which is unfortunate, but it's the truth. Now, in terms of like Aidan said, lowlights and highlights, we'll look at. I'll start with the negative, so we could only go up from there. Just at the beginning of the semester, we had a new student dinner and protesters that had begun their protests at the Baruch College Plaza, then followed us to the dinner and stood at the entrance of Mr. Broadway, which I'm sure many of you know, the kosher restaurant in Midtown. They stood there and harassed and intimidated new Jewish students, freshmen, trying to enter the restaurant. In response, the Baruch administration actually condemned that protest, and then Baruch SJP, or Students for Justice in Palestine, put out a statement justifying why they did that protest and publicly called me out and said I was a genocide enabler. And more recently, the day before October 7th, October 6th, it was a Sunday, there was graffiti found at the entrance of our school that said October 7th is forever. So we've seen kind of a more extreme and more radical uptake in terms of the rhetoric that's being spoken on our campuses. But I'd say the highlights is the Jewish community coming together on our campus. in my Hillel, we have now Persian Jews, Syrian Jews, Jews from the former Soviet Union, Ashkenaz Jews, Israeli Jews, and they all come to one room, to one club, which is really what I think we've seen across all campuses in the U.S. It's the Jewish community realizing that they don't have any other community on campus and coming together because that's the only community they have. And then one other highlight that I can speak to is we were planning to do a Rosh Hashanah event in the plaza, and we met with the president to talk about the event, and he said that we can't do the event because he couldn't guarantee our safety. Now, for me, that I couldn't accept that. As a Jew, I refused to hide my identity. So we met with Richie Torres, and the day after, Richie Torres met with the chancellor of CUNY, and the event was approved. And it was an amazing event. We had hundreds of students. We had Muslim students, Jewish students, Christian students, pro-Palestine, pro-Israel coming and eating and dancing, and it was amazing.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I would say this year has been one that I didn't expect to experience. Of course, going into NYU, hearing about things that have happened in 2018 with the JVP group, and just knowing that there were anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiments on campus, I went into NYU.
Can you say a little bit about what that 2018 situation was, just at some point?
Oh, yeah, of course. I wasn't there, so I could just say from what I've heard that there was a demonstration in the park where students were laying on the ground protesting some students that were doing a pro-Israel event in Washington Square Park, and I believe that it got a bit aggressive between the students that were protesting or demonstrating and the students that were celebrating their Jewish identity, and the police had to get involved, and from there, we don't have JVP on our campus anymore, and the SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine organization on campus, they were not active since then. So that was before I was on campus. I started my academic journey at NYU in 2022, so I knew about what happened there before I was on campus, and I knew that there were students that were going to invalidate my Jewish identity, invalidate my connection to Israel, and that was just because of what I've seen on the news or from what I've seen on social media. But thankfully, my first 2 years at NYU, I was able to be proactive. I didn't face any anti-Semitism. I didn't meet people that were going to tell me that Israel didn't exist. Instead, I met people that were interested in what Zionism was, were able to come to an event that I was hosting and want to debate in a civil way what Zionism was and what the future of Israel is about. And I was really excited that I was able to make that change on campus or foster an environment on campus of civil discourse. And that was within the boundaries of my Hillel, but also we were able to invite people that weren't involved before in our Hillel. For example, students in my classes, I was able to have conversations with them. But after October 7th, that all changed because October 7th gave students on campus that had those anti-Israel sentiments a place to demonstrate what they truly believe. That, for example, I was at one of the protests, I was sitting on the sidelines, and students were telling me to my face that I'm a Nazi and that the baby queer deserved to be kidnapped. And I don't know who would say that, but there are students on campus that believe that. And October 7th and the environment on campus gave them a space to say those things to Jewish students. And from there, the attacks on Jewish students, whether verbal, we haven't had any physical attacks from what I understand on campus, but those have been able to flourish. In addition to those sentiments being on campus, whether through students yelling at each other in campus or at demonstrations in the park or with graffiti on campus. There's also been a lot of misinformation spread, which I think a lot of other campuses can relate to. In one of my classes, there was an article about the education system in California, and the article was about how there was an initiative to get more an education about Arabic culture in the school system, and it didn't give much context about what was being implemented. And all it said was that a Jewish organization tried to combat it, and the article ended with, "This is a fight against Zionism." And I had to read that in my class, and I had to sit there and need to defend what Zionism means, how that situation doesn't represent the Jewish community, and how the article is so biased and misinformative because it doesn't even explain the situation at all. It's just giving a perspective that is misinformative because we don't know what the intention was of that Jewish organization. And you have a lot of other instances where you have narratives being shared on campus where the Jewish voice is not included, and if it is included, it's demonized. I'll speak to one other event where our student government hosted an event talking about the Palestinian struggle, and I wanted to sit in the event. Maybe I was going to learn something. I wanted to see what they would share, and it was astonishing that they shared that Jews went to Israel because of the fertile land, and they would have been better off if they assimilated in Europe. They didn't need to leave Europe, which I think that we can all agree that given what happened in Europe in the 1900s, Jews were not safe. And it's really, I don't understand who would say that at an information session. So you have those instances on campus of Jews being verbally attacked and of us being indirectly attacked by people trying to rewrite our history and tell us who we are. I would say that with all of those sentiments on campus and with that environment that makes you feel nervous and anxious as a Jewish student, there are those highlights that our Jewish community on campus really has never been more united and strong, and it is sad that it does sometimes take something that's negative to bring about a positive, but I'm so grateful that our Jewish community has been united and has been strong and has been supporting each other. I'm so grateful for our Jewish organizations on campus like Olami and Chabad and especially Hillel. I remember, I'll just say one last thing, your story about Simchat Torah reminded me that on last year's Simchat Torah, which was October 7th, we were in the street dancing with the Torah, and there was a couple walking on the street that was asking us, like, what are you doing? And we were explaining to them it's Simchat Torah, and the couple was telling us that they were Jewish, and they were feeling so lonely and sad because of what they've been hearing on the news about what was happening in Israel. And we were able to bring them in and have them be a part of our community, at least for that one night. And it was so beautiful because we were able to offer them a space of comfort and community. And that really just speaks to what the rest of the year was like, where our Hillel and all of the other organizations were able to be a space of community and belonging. And it's so beautiful and important.
It's amazing. I want to ask you, I know that none of you are social scientists, right? And I am also not a social scientist. But I have been overcome with thinking about how do the viewpoints of young people who have access to so much information become so extreme? Like, how do we understand? I mean, I have like questions about your professors, which I'm going to wait on, and also questions about the administrators. I want to start with students. I have often quoted my daughter, who said to me after October 7th, like, I am at a university that legitimately is incredibly hard to get into, and people here are so dumb that I don't understand actually how they got in. Like, she was very focused on, like, you needed really good grades to get in here. And I love that, but I also feel like it goes beyond lack of knowledge because knowledge is so accessible. And so if you guys were to kind of put your behavioral economics or social scientist brain on, what happened that people are honoring Yahya Sinwar on Veterans Day or praising terrorists, or like, what is going on?
I have two answers, and I think they both play a role in it. Number one is you said there's access to tons of information, but the truth is there's access to tons of misinformation. And that's whether it be on social media or in classrooms. I just want to give an example. The day after October 7th, which October 8th, the number one trending hashtag on Twitter was Gaza is starving. They hadn't even begun their invasion into Gaza. That's like how high the levels of misinformation are on social media. So that's one side. But the other side, I truly think these students just want a community and they see this as an opportunity to get involved in something, and it's like a trend. And when the trend dies, they're all gonna go. They're all gonna. I was at the JNF conference this weekend, and Shai Davidai was speaking, and he said, like, these kids are, they're Leninists, Marxists, but like once they have to start paying a mortgage, they're not going to be Leninists and Marxists anymore, and that's the truth. So it's two things: it's the misinformation, and it's also trendy.
And I would say the exact same thing as Aidan. And to add to that as well, this is a college space. It's upper education. And the thing with education is that there is an idea that, oh, I'm educated, I know everything, I don't need to learn more because I'm smart, and when you're smart, you don't need to learn more. I already know everything. But the thing is that as a teacher, that's not true. I learn in my classes that education and being smart isn't what you already know. It's your capability to learn more. I think that's actually a quote by Albert Einstein. I forget the exact words. But with professors and with students that do see themselves as intellectual, there's a phenomenon where they see themselves as people that don't need to listen to other people. And that's just a closed-minded approach. And really, I personally believe that being an intellectual and being smart is to self-reflect and learn more. Because our brains are plastic. The whole point is for us to learn more and to grow. And I think that another thing is I like to think about what these students that are in these college campuses, what they've learned in their high schools and middle schools and elementary schools. I know that when I was in high school, I learned about primary and secondary sources. I learned what is a reliable source. I learned how to critically think. And I questioned, did these students learn that? Personally, when I'm given information, even if it is about Israel or Judaism, I check, what is this source? Is it .org or .com? And I'm worried that these students aren't equipped with those skills to not only critically think, but also handle the information that they're given. And one of my missions as an educator is how can I make sure that my students are going to be equipped with those skills to know how to approach information and see, is this reliable? Is this not? And how can I critically approach this?
And I would say that
that's different. Why do you think Jewish students on campus are involved?
Oh, I love that question. Could I?
Sure, and we'll take questions at the end. Thank you for that.
I would say that that's a very interesting question. For my personal experience, I grew up in a yeshiva day school. I went there for 8 years. And when you study Torah, you learn that every single word has a meaning. And Rashi is like one of the scholars that comments on the Torah, and he has an explanation and an analytical explanation for every single thing in the Torah, in the Jewish text. And there's an idea, I think, in Judaism and Jewish knowledge that we need to be analytical. And I think that's why personally I have that analytical skill. I give it to my Torah knowledge. And I would love for everyone to learn how to be analytical, whether they're studying Torah or not.
Wonderful. Aidan, do you want to add anything to this conversation?
I mean, I think they both really hit the nail on the head. The one thing I'll add is that I think the underlying sentiment behind a lot of the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic protests is an anti-Western and anti-American sentiment. There's this really wonderful essay by Aidan Herzlinger in the Free Press from a couple months back that I highly recommend everyone read, because she's she's far more eloquent than I am, but I'll try to summarize. When you're taught, like, sort of throughout your childhood and earlier education, I wouldn't even say taught, but sort of introduced to inklings of anti-American sentiment, it isn't all coming at once, but it's, for example, in the 5th grade, you're learning about how, for example, the missteps of the American government. And believe me, I am the first to criticize our government. That's, like, I think what makes our democracy so special and so incredible. But then, the next year you're taught again about how America is responsible for another type of oppression, and so on and so forth. And it sort of continues. And then you get to university where you have professors like we do at Columbia that are not only advocating for, like, the downfall of Western society, but also saying it should be replaced by Hamas. And this isn't me embellishing. It makes sense why so many students, privileged students on elite Western college campuses, like the ones that we all attend, are the first ones out in the streets calling for the fall of America alongside the fall of Israel, because to them, they see both as being sort of the root of all necessary evil.
It's so interesting, though, because, like, the majority of students in this country go to public schools, right, that have pretty standardized curriculums that are determined by the state. And I wonder if the world of kids who have gone to, like, progressive high schools, private high schools, affluent high schools, that over-index in some ways around everything being just enormously complex, with always the bias of, critical race theory and just a particular lens on American history, right? Because why isn't this happening more in all of the other universities around our country? Why is it happening in predominantly in Northeastern elite universities, right? And so it makes me wonder, if that point of view is over represented.
I certainly think that's part of it. I think there's, like, this sort of, like, compulsory feeling to overcompensate, essentially. Like, I think a lot of the students on my campus, at least, are students that have no connection to the conflict or to the Middle East whatsoever. But frankly, like, it's
like a proxy war.
Terms, yeah, sort of. They feel responsible for being part of what they describe as the U.S. war machine because they are from, like, an affluent background. They are more often than not white. And so they feel this sense of guilt. And so they think that going and chanting for a free Palestine from the river to the sea and harassing Jews is the social justice that they sort of owe the people that their ancestors were, oppressing, is how they would, I think, describe it.
But how would you understand that at CUNY, which is full of a much more diverse student body, economically, racially, educationally, right? Like, where is it coming from on your campus?
Well, the CUNY is a public school system. So many of the students that attend CUNY colleges went to public school for high school as well. And I think it's a lack of education within public high schools, right? Even I took a history class last year, and we skimmed through the Holocaust so quickly. It wasn't even. Was maybe 10 minutes. That's all we spoke about the Holocaust, and people really need to understand the significance and the severity of the Holocaust, right? And you can't do that in 10 minutes. And so I believe it's the same thing in public schools. I went to yeshiva day school, so I don't really know, but it probably is. They probably don't speak about the Holocaust much. And if they do, they downplay it.
So I wonder if there's actually something different going on. So it's like public education turns out not to serve our needs. Progressive, expensive education turns out not to serve our needs. So I wonder if we get back, actually, Tali, to your point about what we know about people's brains who have grown up with social media. And the way in which it's not just that you're pushed to the extremes on social media, we know that, and you can just like check that very easily for yourself, right? That if you go on YouTube and you look for, a speech by the incoming president, sort of 3 videos down, you're getting very, very, very extreme right-wing propaganda. And I'm sure it's the same on the left as well. I wonder if there is even the capacity to learn, to your point, among people your age who have really grown up with this device in their hands at all times, with the algorithm of social media pushing you towards the lack of ability to question. Like, so if we think about Rashi's like reading so clearly, and he's like, well, what does that word mean? We're not focused on words, we're not focused on facts, we're not even focused on things that necessarily make internal sense. So I think that in a way, it's like, unfortunately, the problem is bigger than the educational establishment. The problem is actually the shutting down of our minds because of the information overload. And I wonder if that resonates with any of you.
Yeah, so to speak to your question and to add to Eden and Aidan's points, I think that the lack of education about anti-Semitism, and actually the Holocaust isn't even taught in a lot of schools, because at least in New York, social studies isn't a standard. You don't need to teach it according to state law. It's just a framework, a suggestion. But even if only the Holocaust is taught in schools, that's not only anti-Semitism isn't only saying that I want to send Jews to concentration camps. It's the propaganda that's attached to it. It's the lies that are attached to it, and it's the systems.
The conspiracy theory.
Exactly. And ADL actually does a really good job of explaining how anti-Semitism is really the systemic oppression against Jews that we've seen for generations, and it comes in so many forms, and it's so complex, but students need to learn about it so this way they don't fall into the trap of anti-Semitism, because it's so easy. If someone tells you, oh, it's the Jews' fault, you would think that they would say, oh, that's not okay to say, but because anti-Semitism is so rooted in our society, a lot of people do fall for it and they do believe it. But to answer your question, I really love psychology because it explains why anti-Semitism is able to thrive. 2 really amazing ideas from psychology are mob mentality and confirmation bias, which some people may be familiar with, where once you're in a group, your emotions and your passions, they're heightened. And once you believe something, it's very hard to change your mind. And the question is, even though that's how humans are, that's how our brain works, can we overcome it? Or is that just how it's meant to be? And I personally believe that we can. And I think that there's 2 strategies that at least Jewish students on campus that we've been using to change people's minds. The first strategy is the top-down, where we talk to administration and we try to get them to pass policies and have these consequences for students that are anti-Semitic, and we try to get the Congress involved, and those are all important. Absolutely. We need our administrations to protect us and to keep us safe. But even if the administration is on our side, the NYPD, the government, even if they're on our side, that's not enough, because that's not what's going to change people's minds. What will change people's minds is the humanization of the Jewish person, which is crazy, I have to say. It's crazy that we have been so dehumanized, but it's important. And for me, what I've seen has worked is just talking one-on-one, which can be triggering. I've been told in one-on-one conversations that there is no anti-Semitism. I've been told things that are just not true, but I need to put myself in those spaces so I can humanize myself, and so I can teach this person that believes that Israel doesn't have the right to exist, that believes that I'm trying to oppress them by just being Jewish and practicing my religion, that I'm human too. I want the same things that they do. I want to graduate. I want to have a job. I want to have a family. I want to feel happy, and I need to humanize myself and have those one-on-one conversations and be personal, and I think that's how we can get through that.
Okay, we only have a couple more minutes, so I'm going to just put us in a different direction, which is, okay, you have, all three of you, been given like a huge promotion in your life. You are now the president of Columbia University. You are the chancellor of the CUNY system, and you are the president of NYU. I mean, Bezrat Hashem, we should have leadership like the three of you. What do you do to shut this whole thing down or manage this situation with greater competence and bring the community to a place of greater healing and understanding? What do you do?
So I see it as, there are short-term goals and then there are long-term goals. In terms of the long term, I'll start with that, and I'll keep it brief because there are so many things that need to change. But frankly, the way that the entire university system, or at least the Columbia system, is built is not one that is sustainable for like a community to really succeed. And we've seen that over the last year. Like there frankly is no Columbia community at the moment. And so things like the
Can you say more about what you mean by that? There's no Columbia community.
Sure. I mean, well, I'll get to that when I give my short-term goals. But long-term, like, the institution itself systemically needs to make a lot of changes, from hiring practices to admission practices to governance practices, where we have this faculty-run Senate that is allegedly on equal footing as the office of the president, but really has been hijacked by a group of radical anti-Israel faculty members that basically want chaos.
And which the president is afraid of, right? Like, that's the other dynamic that those of us who don't live in the lofty world of academia can't understand. Like, I feel like I'm an employer, right? Like, actually, if it came to be that I found out that staff members were misbehaving and going against the stated mission of the JCC of Manhattan, I would have to assume the role of being a leader and do something about that. And so what it seems to me is these faculty senates are like part of a huge problem, because the university presidents seem to live in fear of these people. And it's like, from my perspective, they're your employees. Like, they're respected, they're wonderful, they're leaders, they're incredible, but like, who's in charge? Continue.
Well, that's exactly the problem is, and that takes me to my second part of the answer, which is that there is no moral clarity and there is no moral leadership. Like, on October 8th, it felt like all of the courage that should be with university administrators across the country just sort of like went out the window, which, we're still certainly lacking. But when I say there's no community, I mean that people will not speak to each other simply on the basis of identity. That is how fractured the Columbia community is. the anti-Israel groups, and I don't even like to call them pro-Palestinian, because when they are cheering on Hamas and the butcher of Khan Yunis, Sinwar, they are not being pro-Palestinian, they're being anti-Israel. But these groups have this anti-normalization doctrine in which they will not normalize relations with Zionists or Zionism. And so that means me. And that means them, because we are Zionists and we are Jews, and so we're not worthy of being looked in the eye. And that took root the week after, October 7th of 2023. It's been 13 months, and the university has not condemned it as being antithetical to the mission of a very university. We can't even have respectful disagreement and dialogue because they will not speak to us. So I think that is like the most simple step one of repairing the community, is condemning this refusal to simply engage and look your peers in the eye because they are Israeli or Zionists or Jews who don't condemn their Zionism. And so I think there's no way to really heal and to reform the system that needs to be reformed when you have not just a group of fringe radicals, but, for example, a coalition representing over 100 student clubs like we have at Columbia that are part of this apartheid divest coalition that will not normalize relations with Zionism and therefore the majority of Jews on campus. So if we can't speak, we can't heal.
Thank you. Aidan, Chancellor of CUNY.
It is so simple. Enforce the rules. We have the rules in place. We have something called the Henderson rules on all our CUNY campuses. And this is also spoken about in the Littman report on anti-Semitism at CUNY. There's specific rules regarding protests, one of them being that if you're protesting, you have to identify yourself. And these rules are not being enforced. And it's difficult, definitely at Baruch, because where they protest, it's public property. It belongs to the city. But on campuses like City College, that should be enforced 100%. And it's not that hard. You have campus security that can go around making sure students identify themselves, showing their IDs, and that's really all that needs to be done. And these students will understand that, okay, they know who I am, and I can't act the wrong way. I can't act inappropriately. I can't literally commit crimes. That's it.
Really, just for the icing on the cake that you two have baked, I would say that everything that you said, and in addition to that, it's so important that we just stick to the values of what is upper education. And at NYU, we pride ourselves on our diversity, and like Eden has said, that's been a struggle for students where because I'm Jewish, because I'm a Zionist, you can't talk to me. That's not embracing diversity. That's just doing the opposite of that. And I'm really proud to be an NYU student because our administration has done a very good job of abiding to both of your points. Our university was very explicit this past summer when they updated their non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy to include that Zionism is a part of the Jewish identity, and that if you have something against Zionism, then you have something against a student at NYU, and that's not okay. And even though that should just be something that people know, the definition of Zionism, that is something that the university had to explicitly state. And it's so important that our university did that because that's what education's about, telling the truth. And that is the Jewish truth, and that is what Zionism is. It's part of the Jewish identity. And the university, in addition to updating their policy and enforcing a training for everybody to complete on campus to make sure that they abide by that policy, they've also took measures to have our campus be a space where you can't have demonstrations or encampments that are going to intimidate Jewish students. We have barricades, we have extra security, and even though you want your campus to feel open, that's what our administration had to do to make sure that we don't have that again. And students are frustrated by it. Students are not completing the trainings, but the people showing up to the encampments are a lot less. And in addition to our university updating its policy and having that training and enforcing barricades, they've also had dialogue sessions, which I'm really proud of Dean Rodriguez, our Dean of Students. His office has been hosting sessions for students to learn more about the conflict, have dialogue with each other. It's called NYU Dialogue, a program that the office is enforcing. I was in a restorative justice circle that was part of it. It was me, an Israeli girl, a girl with Palestinian parents, and the head of the Muslim Student Association. And it's a really great start as long as students get involved in it.
So we have three really powerful recommendations, I think. The first is follow the stated rules of the campus. The second is restate and hold people accountable to what the mission of a university is, which is dialogue and learning. And the third is create spaces where people can see and experience the humanity of other people and learn something maybe that they didn't know before, and that I'm sure exists across all political leanings and all sides of this really difficult conflict. So for a final question, I want to ask each of you to reflect on how this experience of being on campus in this unusual time, and in the case of all three of you leading so powerfully, how does it make you think about what your next step is, either Jewishly or professionally?
It's the question I'm asking myself every day as a graduating senior with no job. So if you have any leads, please let me know. On the one hand, I'm being completely transparent, I'm nervous for the future of higher education in this country. I think we have two options, especially with the current political climate. We can either, when I say we, I mean universities, so I should say they, I guess. University leadership can either sort of turn in to themselves and try and resist this external pressure to adapt and reform, as I think we all can agree that they have sort of no choice but to do, or they can succumb to that pressure and finally take, I guess I won't say finally, because in the case of NYU, your administration has done a wonderful job, but at least in the case of Columbia and so many other schools, unfortunately, these universities still haven't really acknowledged the scope of the issue as being more than just a fringe group of students causing problems on campus. We're at a point where we need reform, and we need institutional reform, and we need it now. Otherwise, I think that universities like Columbia actually will, I don't want to say crumble, but like potentially might crumble. And I don't think that's what any of us want. I think the threat or the lever of federal funding, for example, being withheld is an incredibly important one, because I think it might actually have the power to force universities like mine that are so reluctant to address the problem to finally take some of those necessary steps. But at the same time, none of us want funding for research grants or financial aid to go away. We just don't want systemic, pervasive anti-Semitism to be the defining feature of our universities any longer. So those are sort of the two options that I see Columbia having to reconcile with come January, if not sooner, frankly. And I'm really hoping that they will take this as the sort of push that they need to finally reform and stand up to the faculty members on the Senate, for example, that are giving them such a hard time, because frankly, our institutions of higher learning are defining beacons of what make America the incredible nation that we are. And I would hate for that to change, but the way that things are going right now are certainly not sustainable. So I'm cautiously optimistic for a better future. And if I can be part of that in any way, I am more than happy to, because I care about the future of higher education, and I care about America, and I clearly care about the Jewish community here. So
I'm a real estate major. and now I'm thinking, like, what do I want to do after college? And one of the things that I've thought about is going to Israel and doing a 1-year master's at Reichman University in counterterrorism. But the truth is, I don't know. And people come up to me and ask me, they're like, so are you going to be a politician now? I really have no idea what I'm going to do. But on the bright side, I have 2.5 years to figure that out. So.
Yeah, you're very lucky that you have your 2.5 years. As a senior, I remember my mom was telling me that when she graduated college, she was like, I want to be in college forever. I don't want to leave. And I was like, why would you not want to leave college? Like, you're not going to need to do work anymore, no more essays. But now I get it. If I could, I would love to just, be a student leader for the rest of my life. It's, even though it's tiring, it's so rewarding. And it's my senior year, so I have to think about what I want to do next year. Right now, I'm focusing on my career, a master's program, and finding a way to still be a Jewish advocate as a young professional, of course, because my Jewish community is so important to me. And I'm figuring out how I could have both of those things. But I will say that right now, what I'm doing to make sure that I leave a legacy on campus as a senior is empower the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors of NYU. I've made it my mission this year to make every student in the Jewish community know that they are a leader, whether they're talking to administration or whether they're teaching a Torah class or attending an event at the Hillel. They are a leader as long as they're staying true to their Jewish identity, because that is what will strengthen the Jewish community. So, of course, I wish that I could do everything, talk to the president, work for every advocacy organization. Of course, I wish I could be in many places at once, but that's not possible. And I believe in the potential of all of my peers, and I made it my mission to make sure that they will be leaders as well in the way that connects to them.
Just to close, Tali and Aidan and Eden, I want to say a couple of things. The first is that the three of you are extraordinary. Extraordinary. The second is that even though it doesn't always feel this way, the universities that you attend are lucky beyond measure to have you there. And the third is that the Jewish people are lucky beyond measure to have your leadership and the clarity of your voice and your commitment to all of us. And wherever your career takes you, and trust me, a bunch of decades into this, like it sort of goes like this, and you never feel like, sometimes I'm like, how did I get here? I hope what you'll always have is that sense of being part of a global people, a people across so many hundreds of years of history, and that has such an incredible future ahead of it. Thank you so, so, so much, and thank you to Limud.
I just want to thank you all as well on behalf of Limud New York. Let me try to get it right. Yael, Aidan, and Eden. Tali, Aidan, and Eden. And of course, Joanna Samuels for moderating this discussion. You guys, you're amazing. Really, I know you're going to go on to do even more incredible things. So thank you. 2 quick announcements. There's actually, and I'm saying this in front of the CEO of the JCC, there's not supposed to be any food allowed in this room. So please take, if you've brought any wrappers or cups in with you, please take them out with you. And thank you for coming. And you'll see signs around the building. Limud New York is made possible by the power of volunteers. So we need your volunteer power to make the next Limud happen. You'll see a QR code. You're going to get a survey tomorrow. Please sign up. We need your help. And again, thank you to you amazing students. And onward and upward.
You guys are amazing. Thank you.
Great.
I really appreciate it.
Send me email if you're looking for a job.
Thank you.
Stream, we'll see you back in 20 minutes.